Hi, Sue.
Hi, Yasmina. How are you?
Very well, thank you. It is very early in the morning here today. It's Tuesday, and I feel I'm quite excited to have you here today and that we can chat a little bit about what you do. And I just wanted to again thank you on behalf of Yazi Bags as well as the Australian sewing community for allowing us and giving us the opportunity to get to know you today. We've prepared a few questions. We just want to understand your journey, uh, where you sort of began. There's so much everyone wants to know about you because you have such an amazing global following. And, we hear about you everywhere. And I often think, well, it's nice that I personally know you. We've been working together for many years. And I think there is a curiosity around many people as to your inspiration, what makes you design certain styles or whatever it is. But I do hope you can answer these questions and let the Australian and the New Zealand and just everyone down under at this point in time understand your story. So I'm going to start with a few questions that I think might help lead you into giving, some sort of a specific description and answer to what we might want to know. So firstly, I'm going to start at the beginning, and probably that's the best place to start is where were you born and raised, and how has this influenced the use, just your creativity in where you are today?
Okay, well, yes, I was born in Zambia in Africa, and I then went to South Africa when I was very young, about 5 years old, and I graduated from high school and from nursing school in South Africa. And I think I've always had a creative feel for a lot of different things. So when I was a child, my dad is very artistic, and he would introduce my sister and I to many different art forms. So I was exposed to a lot, but I think that what really caught my attention was the color and the influence of sort of graphic, I want to say more like naive but African art, and that definitely has influenced my direction that I went as a designer. So I lived in Africa until in my early 30s, and then I immigrated to America, and that's where I live now in Ohio in America.
And where did you, meaning how did you learn to quilt and embroider? I mean, obviously you were exposed to a lot of crafts, but at what stage of your life did you sort of get into the quilting and embroidery side of things?
So I was sewed from a very young age, and my mom was a seamstress, so I learned a lot from her. We were lucky back then. We had home economics in school, so we did a lot of sewing. And I started to quilt in the 70s. It was sort of interesting. There wasn't much quilting fabric in South Africa, but my mom and dad would come on business to the United States, and she would bring me back lots of little calico prints back then, and I would just really piece them into my clothing. So I made a lot of clothing and did a lot of piecing with fabrics. And then I went actually to live in England for about 3 years in my early 20s, and that's where I took my first quilting class, and that was English paper piecing. And so I got into the quilting, obviously into the fabric. At that time, I then returned to South Africa for about 10 years before I came to the US and started to teach some classes of, quilting classes. So back then, all I was doing was piecing and just playing with different types of fabrics. When I came to the US, I took a class in applique. And so I started to do just cotton applique. So that was really fun. I liked the more sort of folky type images. And then I made my first wool quilt probably 20 years ago now. It's probably even a bit longer than that. And once I had made that quilt, I just fell in love with working with hand-dyed wool. And that was sort of the start of it all. I started my own business, and I was mixing sort of cottons and wools together. And back then, no one was doing that. It was either wool or cotton, and it was primitive or primitive wool quilts. And so my sister decided she'd like to start dyeing some wool. So I said, yeah, why don't you dye a few colors and then we'll see where we're going to go. And so she dyed this lovely palette of colors, and she said, well, why don't you pick 12 of them? And I picked 37. So we started with 37 colors of wool, and she dyed for many, many years for me. And then about, I guess, 10 years ago now, my son Jason took over the dyeing, which we do now in Ohio. So we were, going back, I think the first person or company that introduced colorful wools to the market. So so let's talk about the embroidery. I was never an embroiderer. I never learned to embroider as a child. We did mainly knitting and sewing. And so I'd been working with wool quilts for a few years. And when I teach, I like to be able to really teach people new things. And so I thought, well, what if I try one or two embroidery stitches? And that's how it started. So I actually learned the embroidery stitches as I taught them. And so those, for a few years, I would put one or two stitches on a few projects. And then I got to do Imperial Blooms, which was is a quilt with flower blocks. And that was the year I was going to really learn embroidery. And that's probably about 10 years ago. And so I started with that. And since then, I just got so enamored with the dimension and texture you get with layering with wool and cottons, and then all the embroidery stitches, that it's hard to stop now.
I find that, I was going to ask you about the story between this unique style of the way the textured quilting that you do. And obviously, you've just mentioned that right now, because every time I look at social media or anything that you do, and you do know I'm not a sewer and I don't sort of do any crafts, but I do appreciate it's eye catching. You think, wow, everyone's like another wow, and I find that's been, for me, being a non-crafter, I get so attracted to what you're doing. I think it's the color. I like a lot of color, and everything around you is a lot of color. So I have always appreciated where you've taken it. I mean, I know people like the subdued kind, and those are nice too, but it's not me. And you bring out another dimension in the way people are seeing things now, and they get excited. I know when they come and they talk about the way what you're doing in your books and stuff, it's always around the color, the texture, and you really have built that whole side of it. That there's a lot of people now following that sort of a style as well. But I know, it was in the beginning where you began it, where you started the whole process of the textured side of it and the use of color and wool and everything. It's just beautiful. I mean, I'm just wondering, at this stage, with the way the pandemic is going and stuff, you've been teaching for so long, and you're obviously not going out right now. Are you going anywhere at this stage, or are you sort of pretty well home-based and running the business from there?
Well, I've been home for the last 14 months, but I am teaching in a couple of weeks. I'm going to Santa Fe, so that'll be the first trip away. I have a few trips planned. We're just taking it month by month to see if they're going to be a go or not. But I have missed that part of it because I do love the interaction with my students and the creativity from the classes. So it'll all be fun to do a bit of that again.
I think we're all looking forward to getting out a little bit now, because I think it's been a long time and we've been patient. But for the right reasons. I think, we had to accept the reality of what's going on in the world, and that's great. But I've also noticed you do quite a bit of online, like demonstrations, a little bit of, is it teaching or is it more like you were doing certain stitches and explaining how it all happens?
I did 2 programs last year through Instagram called Insta Stitch with Sue. And one was a 90-day program where we did a circle a day. And the other one was little pumpkin blocks that we did a block a week. And it was very therapeutic for me, as well as I've heard from many people, because it was something for everyone to look forward to every day. So we did a little video and instructions. And so in the end, we had a little piece. I actually have it here. I can just sort of show it, of 90 days of little circles. And so every day we did a circle, and we did all sorts of different creative things, even a little octopus down here, little bird. But it was something to focus on, and something positive. And so that was really good.
I think during this time, there were lots of people wanting to do little projects, and probably they had time available,
Yes,
and
right.
it's still there. I think generally, would you say this? I think this industry has sort of come out okay in all of this. We're still not out of the woods yet.
Yeah.
But,
I think it's like any time there's any type of problem, you have to think creatively of how you're going to deal with it, and what you can do to keep afloat. And so that was part of it. It was from a business point of view as well as from a creative point of view that we did that.
Yeah. So as far as the business now, you've got a showroom, and at this stage, people do come in and visit you right now, right?
Yeah, we've opened. We actually have a physical store now. So we have a store, and we have a big classroom. So we do give classes here, and we have sew-ins, and we have a retail site, as well as our big warehouse that is for our wholesale business.
Right. Now, I think, and even your children are all involved in the business, so most of them?
3 out of 4 of them, yes.
Wow.
So,
Well, I tell you though, we're looking forward to seeing all of you again. I'm not sure when it's going to be, because we're not allowed to travel to the US or leave the country as such. Like, they don't encourage it, I mean, it's not that they're going to say refuse it, but I think it's more important for us to understand how we're going to get back if anything changes. So as far as us being an island, in a manner of speaking, I think there's less encouragement of people leaving and coming into the country, and that's what's kept us reasonably safe against
right.
I think that's important too. Do you have family around in South Africa still, or you sort of have moved away?
No, they've moved away now. So I don't have any family, but our hearts are still there.
Yeah, I think it is. I'm from South Africa too, and with all the problems going on there, it's been difficult to accept, the reality that there's so many people we know, loved ones, that have lost their lives during this time. They're okay for now, but during that difficult period, I think we were all very, very concerned. And we always are concerned about all of you out here. We think about you and hope. I mean, we know you're staying safe, and at least you in your business, and you're not going too far from Uniontown, Ohio, right? You're there. So there's nothing. But the weather's improving now quite nicely, isn't it?
Yes, it's spring, so everything's in bloom, and we're going to get a few warmer days this week, so it's good. Yeah, we had a snowstorm last week, which was unusual, but it's going to be really nice this week.
Absolutely. So enjoy it. I think all of you deserve that from, the fact that you've been through a winter and everything. And I think that's important. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk to you about is, there's always, like everywhere I go, people, even in Australia and the US, you hear about what can be done to encourage the youth, the new generation today, into the world of creativity, stitching, whatever they do. I mean, it doesn't have to be long projects like quilts or whatever, but in whatever form. What do you feel about this, and how do you sort of plan some of your classes around it?
Well, I think it is a challenge because I think a lot of young people, their focus is to be online and not necessarily taking classes in stores. But I guess we've tried to seek out projects that younger people would do that we have on our website. So we have, young people in our creative team, and they're always looking for things that would appeal to them, which is nice, not just to me. And so that will help. I think it's also very important to have a social media good social media team that is promoting things, doing free classes online to get people interested in what you're doing. I'm doing actually, this is the second year, but I do 2 block of the months now, a year. One is a simpler one and one is a much more advanced one. And so we've seen that we've had younger people signing up for that. So I think a lot of young people who've done a lot of embroidery or basic embroidery are looking to learn a little bit more creative stitches and things like that. So that is a good thing. So like you said, it's little projects, not necessarily big projects, that they can keep their hands busy and also be creative and learning.
I think they also want achievable, like meaning, short term, so that they finish it, they can use them as gift ideas. I think that's important too. I don't think they have the patience today that you would have had, not me, but you would have had
Yes.
to finish something over a period of time. I've always wondered, it takes a certain personality to sit there and make sure it finishes over. And some can take, how long would be your longest project, Will? If I had
Oh
to ask.
gosh, so the big quilts that I do as a block of the month takes a year to do. I mean, it's not a full time. Obviously, it takes a couple of weeks every month to do the blocks. So there's a lot of work and a lot of time that goes into those. So, we're not always looking for projects like that. In fact, while I've been home, it's been fun because with having the store now, I can do little samples for it, and it's been fun to do some quick and easy little samples, just really with the focus on the fabric and not necessarily, on labor-intensive things. And so I've enjoyed that myself, so that you get something in a couple of hours, you've done a little project.
No, that's great. I just love what you do, and I love your social media, and just everything that you present out there is fabulous. I also wanted to ask you, I've noticed some Sashiko stuff that's going on with what you're doing, and I think it's beautiful. I love, if I had to attempt anything in my life, let's just say if tomorrow someone said, okay, what would you like to do in the sewing arena? I might.
Yes.
It seems like I can follow
Good.
a suit.
It would be good because it's just a little running stitch generally, and it's something you can just put in your purse, and whenever you have a few minutes, you can pull it out and do a little bit. I find it very therapeutic. I love to do it as well.
Right, right. And what's like meaning? Have you done any projects on like using the Sashiko Boro style of embroidery on any uh, like quilts or anything at this
Yeah.
stage?
So I do a lot of background stitching in my quilts, and so I've started to do quite a bit of sort of sashiko stitching in the background. But I've also done where I do a traditional sashiko piece, and then I'll applique it onto a background or into a piece it into something. But again, you can always do the little, pieces of cloth and then make them into little bags and drawstring bags and use them for different things like that as well. So it's very fun to do. And we do it with all types of thread. We have a lot of different types of sashiko thread we sell, but we do it with all sorts of threads, all the, eleganza and the wool thread and everything as well.
So that's still the main, like the eleganza thread is what you sort of focus, like meaning that's your main thread base
Well,
there.
it's a basic, you're the basic pearl cotton, but we stock I don't know, maybe 40 brands of different types of threads. So I like lots of other textural threads as well that I use. So it's, yeah, there's a vast variety that we love to play with.
I noticed you have some South African thread too.
We do. We are actually just became a distributor for them. So we wholesale them for to our stores, but we have 120 colors now in size 5 and size 8. It's a beautiful, beautiful thread. It's a hand-dyed thread. So we love it.
Yeah, now I noticed that it's, I was reading on it. And also some of the books you've been writing and preparing. What was the latest one that you've,
Well, it's still homegrown, like behind me, but we are in the process of writing some of our books that we're a little bit behind on. So the next one will be Forest for the Trees, which is my tree quilt. And then we have Chirp and Of a Feather still to write. So you know, we've been very fortunate and very busy, but we've been a bit behind on the production of books.
well, I think you're covering a lot of ground here, even with, can you imagine what would have happened if we were out at the shows, you were, exhibiting somewhere and being at markets and trying to achieve what you've done in the last year? There's only that many hours in the day, and you need to stop and take a breather. I just feel like I've been talking to a few people in the US, a lot of businesses, and generally this industry has done fairly well. So, and I'm sure you've seen that. And I think those little workshops that you did, the 2 projects that you picked up last year, I think they were great ideas and it really appealed to everyone. And that was one way of keeping everyone busy. And it just brought everything you do in a patient, like might not have found that time to sit and explain these stitches the way you did.
Right. I would never have been able to do that because I was on the road teaching so much. So it was good. We had a new focus for a while, which was fun.
Absolutely. And as far as your times for your warehouse and stuff, do you have limited times for access to it in the US?
No, most of our orders come from online, but people wanted to stop and purchase. If you were a wholesaler, we're open from 8 until 5 Monday through Friday, and our store is open Tuesday through Saturday. So from 10 till 4, I think it is. So there's always someone here during the week.
Now, do you personally switch off on the weekends and not do any sewing? Is there any day of the week that you don't?
No. I sew all the time. I would never. That's the problem with handwork. It's very meditative and it's lovely, but it takes a long time. So I never, in fact, have enough hours to do what I would love to do, all of it that I'd love to do. But I stitch every day, every evening, and a lot of the time over the weekends. But I do hope to get out into my garden in the next few weeks and plant some more flowers, and which I love to do as well.
Yeah. I think I knew that about you, that you like gardening and stuff.
Yes.
So probably this would be, now with the weather improving, it should be great for you to get out of it. But do you actively in the business, you sort of are not actively working, but you're more in the class side of it? If there's classes and stuff, you would.
Yeah, I mean, through the pandemic, I worked in the shipping department for a long time because we were short and we had to send people home. So we worked as a team, the family, and did that for quite a few months. But we are in a good place now with good staff covered for everywhere. So I get a lot of time to create and brainstorm and come up with new things during the day, which is really good.
I just think, the fact that your family is so supportive and are part of this, it does help just having that little bit of breath in the way you're thinking and this brainstorming. All of them are probably involved in different areas of your business, and that can bring it all together for you. And I always found that quite fascinating, that you've been able to have different skills and yet work together, and that's what makes it so successful in what you're doing. You should be very proud of all of them. It's been right there next to you, and trying to get ahead. And it's been great. I know things are going well, but at the same time, we just hope things remain safe in America. We know none of us are out of it. Even in Australia, we feel sometimes, oh, we're so fortunate, but you just don't know from one day to the other what's going to happen. So just be thankful for where we are and
Yes.
going forward. And what I'd like to ask you, another question is, do you, like, I know you use Yazi bags as part of what you do, and as projects and stuff. Was there anything in particular that you sort of feel drawn to with the bags, that you feel that they work for you in your
We use and sell a lot of them. So we have different bags here. I have a little bag. We have different bags that we like to put blocks on, and they work really well for what I do, because often you can just have a little block and embellish it and put it on, and it just jazzes up your bag, but it also makes it a little bit more personal, which is nice. We love, we love these little thread holders, and I often will do a little ribbon on the front, or a little patch with different appliques. We use the allium pouches a lot, and we love your bags that we can put the pouches in. So the little folder and the craft box, we use those. And then every year for Block of the Month, I always use one of your bags as our project, and I design something that is especially for that project. So this year we're doing mushrooms as one of the Block of the Months, and I did a beautiful, I think it was an atlas moth on the one that I did for this year. So we find them very useful, and so do all my customers and my students. So we're grateful that you're there making those and supplying them to the industry.
No, that's great, because it has been 20 years for us that we operated. So we're celebrating our 20th anniversary this year. I don't even know how I got here, but whatever it is, I'm very grateful. We all are, in whatever we do in the smallest way. I'm not going to be able to go back to the factory to India for a little while now. But the fact that we've got everything so running as smoothly as it is, I can place orders, and they know, but new designs are going to be a bit difficult. But fortunately, I had about 8 new products that I was going to introduce last year in Houston, and it never happened. So I'm sitting with them at home in Melbourne, Australia, admiring them every day and wondering when to launch them.
Oh, well, we can't wait to see what they are. It will be great.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think in time we will, but everyone needed to sort of take a break now and say, there's no need to bring anything and cause more confusion. So I was happy just to stay where I was, and we'll wait for everything to come through. And I'm sure I'll bring something up. I mean, I've got the ideas that come from crafters. You've also suggested so many ideas to me over the time. And what's the best part of it is when I see your beautiful project on a bag, absolutely brilliant, and they keep their notions and their supplies within the bag. So that becomes like a real double purpose of something that they've done personally, personalized it, put a lot of effort into it, and then they still can use the bag. So it's not just a pin cushion or a table runner, it's more a bag that they can use.
Yes, but I always think, well, what would we have done with all our threads if we didn't have them?
Yeah. I get people asking about your thread reel bag, the little black one that you sell. Often in Australia, they want to know about those little thread bags. Are you supplying it to anyone here in Australia, any stores?
Thread bags?
The 3-piece, the sleeves, the sleeves
that sleeves. Yeah, we have stores that buy them from us. We
Okay,
do
in
wholesale them.
Australia?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Because I wouldn't mind knowing, because I get lots of emails around that and I keep sending them to your website. So I'm
Okay,
still trying
yes.
to figure out. Okay.
No, we have lots of stores that buy them because they like them to put they were designed to put the eleganza in, so they go
Yes.
perfectly for those.
Yeah. And
Yeah,
they fit other threads too in there, but I just think those look so beautiful. It just looks like a little shop within your sleeve, you know? And they color code them, and they really, I would say that has been such a popular item, you know.
uh-huh.
I know, you're supplying them and whatever it is, but the fact that I get these questions even today, and I was wondering, I've been meaning to ask you whether they're available easily here. Even then I can recommend, where they can go to,
Yes,
but I
yes.
just haven't been able to do that. So okay, now that we're getting sort of towards the end of things, can you do you want to show us something, tell us something, share something? We just want to hear a little bit more from you
Oh,
before we leave.
well, I had a couple of other little projects here that I'll share. Um, just little projects that we did. Here's a little pincushion, and it's sort of colorful and has a little label. This is called a pansy pincushion. So we did a few little projects like this. This is the other one. This is a needle roll of mine. So a lot of people are loving to do this project. Uh,
Mhm.
and it has lovely little labels inside. And this was actually our very first PDF pattern we did. So we're trying to do some PDF patterns for people abroad who, it's hard for them sometimes unless they're placing a large order to make it worth their while. So this is one of our PDF patterns with lots of stitching on, and it sort of rolls up like this into a needle roll, and you can take it with you.
I
So
love the
a couple of little
colorway.
projects that we did around Christmas time. So, uh,
Um,
and
so,
like I said, we're busy working on, the new books and a squash squad pattern that people have been asking for. And yeah, we have lots of new templates that we brought out a couple of months ago. Um, yeah, we
are you
always
planning? Are you planning a few new projects for Christmas this year? You come up with something that maybe.
probably, yes,
Yeah,
I'm sure we will. I'm sure we will. We're
thanks.
always trying to do some little
Yeah.
small projects that are doable. And
And your 12 days to Christmas also, I noticed you have that pattern are going
we
to.
have that every year,
Yeah. Sitting
day.
in Australia, being a non-crafter, I do follow you, and I know a lot about what you
It's the
do.
problem with social media. You can't keep anything secret, huh?
No, no, you can't. But look, I just think the fact that, we've met so many times at various, we are missing being out there. But to be honest, if I had to ask you, like I'll tell you straight, I don't really want to go out again. I've sort of reached that point where I'm satisfied where I am. We've
Uh-huh.
sort of figured out another way to do our business and present our products, and it has worked for me. It might not be working for everyone,
Yeah.
but how do you feel about it?
Well, part of the teaching is also traveling and going to new places, and I do love to travel. So I will be happy when I feel safe to travel. I don't think I'll travel to the same extent that I was before COVID, because I was on the road 95% of my life. So it has been nice to regroup with my family and spend some time in my home. But I will look forward to selective teaching and really being involved with my students. That's the part that I just love, is the interaction and the creativity in classes that I don't think you ever get on an online class. It's just not quite the same. So I do look forward to that. But I'm not getting any younger either, so I probably won't, like I said, won't travel as much, but be a bit more selective with that.
I think we're all getting to that stage where it's also to do with the fact that as we're getting older, probably, but the fact that it has worked at this level, it's good enough. In your case, I understand totally that teaching is like when you're personally there with the student, it makes a big difference. So I'm not in that position, but hopefully we come there soon and we meet up again and
Yeah,
get
it'll
together
be
again
lovely.
and see
Have
each other.
a good Indian meal together.
Absolutely. And I did say I'm going to do the cooking. So tell your children I'm definitely going to be preparing something special for you. Uh,
Okay.
I just love the fact that we know each other, we're comfortable, and we've worked together for so long on a professional basis, as well as just got together. And hopefully, even beyond all this, we can remain good friends. And I think that's been the most important, that we've sort of enjoyed a lot of laughs together. We've chatted. We can talk about anything. We come from the same background, and those things are important as well.
That's
So I really feel very honored, Sue, that, after all these years that I've known you, that finally we've got together sort of sharing a screen in a way. And that's been probably something I've been wanting to do for a long time, and no better time than now, where we just don't know when things are going to improve. They are getting better. We'd like to be positive, but we cannot just sit and say and do nothing. So hopefully this will help. I'm going to share whatever I found and whatever we talked about today with a lot of people around in the Australian and the New Zealand market. If I can send it back to South Africa through my friends, I will too. So we'll definitely share your story. I appreciate, I've got to know a lot more about you today. I mean, even though I've known you for so long, I think you've explained parts that you fill the gaps in a way for me. And I think
Well,
that's important.
send my love to all the Australians and New Zealanders as well, because I have made a lot of friends over the years, coming and teaching and interacting through social media. So I'm very fond of everyone back in
Well,
your.
they love you. From all the shows we do out here, there's nobody that doesn't know you. And they really, wait. And if someday you come back here at some point, I mean, it'll be great. But I know it's not going to happen right away. But the fact that you're here and they're going to see this interview, I'm sure they appreciate that very much, because you do have such a big following, and it's taken years to build that credibility for you, and hard work too. It's not just about doing something, a lot of people teach, but you've done it in a very distinctive style, and whatever you've achieved, it's been, I think, well worth the effort, where people are actually appreciating everything you do. Anything little, if it's Sue Spargo, it's fabulous, and I like to hear that. So I do appreciate your time here today, Sue. And please give my love to all the family, and hopefully we'll catch up again at some stage. I just wanted to share this today, and and thank you personally from me that you were able to do this and provide the time.
Oh, well,
Okay?
thank you for the invitation. It was lovely talking to you, and you keep safe. Send my love to Dilip.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye. Bye.
Hi, I'm Sue Spargo. I'm a designer and a maker of many different things, quilts and embroidery. Just because of what I do, I have lots and lots of threads, needles, and I always love to find the correct or the best solution for storage. And that'll be when I'm traveling on the road or here back in my studio. Many years ago, I came across Yazzii bags and loved the quality, loved the organization of them. So we use many of them in projects that I do for our business as well as for my personal use. So I thought today I would share some different ways to embellish them, because it's always really fun to personalize a piece rather than just using it blank. So I often make what I would call little mini quilts that would go on the top of a bag. I also do ribbon design, so I often incorporate ribbons on the handles. So I thought I'd share with you some different ideas. Recently, I came out with some pre-cuts with wonderful threads, and these are little pre-cut blocks, just like this. And so they would be a fun starting point for people who are not that familiar with wool or embellishment, because you just get a nice little square that you can either bind or put a little border on, and that would make a really fun piece to put on your quilt. With each of my big projects, like for instance folk tales, so that's my quilt with my memory of growing up in South Africa, full of animals that I loved. So with those projects, I always include a Yazi bag as the workbox for that year. And so I often use the Crafter's Companion, which is a bigger bag, because in that we can store all our applique threads, wool threads, cotton threads, as well as all our embellishment threads, and often even the blocks will fit in as well, so it's a nice way to keep a whole project together. Otherwise, sometimes I just embellish little ones just to carry along when I'm traveling home for the night or on the road teaching, so that I have everything together in one little bag. So I'll use an applique design. Often, because I work with hand-dyed wool, I would cut out all the pieces and then I would applique the wool down. Alright, so once you decide what little pattern you want to make, you would take your pattern, and we're going to now draw this on freezer paper. And I always use freezer paper because it's reusable, it's easy to use, reasonable in price. So I'm going to trace this little leaf on here, and I always trace my images and then I cut them out on the line. So I do like to cut out my templates. I don't particularly want them to have any extra paper around the outside, because I like to cut along the edge of the paper and not through the paper and the wool at the same time. And I drew it on the matte side of the freezer paper. The back side of it has a little bit more glossy, but that is the side that's going to iron down onto the wool. So there's my little leaf. So right here I've got my iron set up. I'm just going to use a hot dry iron that onto, I always say the right side, that with wool it's hard to tell what's the right side, so often I do it for the color or the texture. Sometimes they have a different texture on both sides. Now I'm going to cut this out around the edge of the freezer paper like this. And you can see how nice the freezer paper is for a template, because it'll stay on there. And the other really nice thing is that you can reuse it. So you could, if you had multiple leaves, you could reuse it. So now I'm just going to peel this off. The thing about freezer paper that's fun is if you want to ever do like a direction, you know, if I had lots of leaves and it was a top and a bottom, you can mark it. You can also make yourself notes on them so that you can keep them for further use. So then I would take it to my piece and I would pin it in place. And I like to use these little applique pins. I don't like big pins, so that they just hold the wool in place. And as I'm trying to think about where I would start with anything that underlays anything. So for instance, I would do this little stem first because it underlays the yellow. I'd do the yellow, and then I would also do the purple, and the last part I would do would be the green leaf. So I use wool thread. So the Ilana wool thread that we have comes in 60 colors. We dyed them to match our wool, so you can get a really nice match. This is a wool acrylic thread, and you need the acrylic in it so that it is strong enough to stitch with. If it was 100% wool, it often will shred. I'm going to use about 18 inches in length, and I'm now going to thread a 24 chenille needle. So the easiest way to thread this is you would thread it from the end that comes off the thread, not the end that you cut. And I always double it and just hold it in my fingers and thread it like that. It's easier to thread it double than to thread the end that might be a little bit wispy. And then I'm going to put a quilter's knot in the end. So you're going to make a circle like that. wrap 3 or 4 times and then hold the wraps and pull it down, and you'll have a nice little knot at the bottom of your thread there. So I'm going to come up from the back of my work, and what's really nice about wool applique, it's raw edge, and if you have wool, which I like, that felts up fairly tightly, then you can do a really small stitch on the edge. You will not need to use any fusible on the back. So I'm doing a little stitch that is about 1/8 of an inch deep and 1/8 of an inch apart. I always tell my students that I put a little bit of tension on each stitch because I want the thread to nestle into the wool. When it nestles in, it becomes very invisible, so you can hardly see it. The other important thing is that you're going to make sure that when you applique, you clear the edge of the wool so that you get a nice smooth edge along the edge here. If you go underneath it like this, you're going to get a sort of scallopy edge. So I want a nice smooth edge. I also don't want anything to fight with the edge. So that is why I use the wool thread, because the texture is like wool, and I use a thread that matches, because when I come back to do embellishment stitches, I don't want this stitch, like if I'd done this in a black stitch or a pearl cotton, to me that is an embellishment already. So you don't want to have something that contrasts with it, because it'll fight with what you're going to put on as the embellishment. So I would just whip stitch everything down. I will just finish this thread as well, so you can just see how I finish it. So when I run out of thread, I'm going to take my thread to the back, and you can see my stitches are all perpendicular to the edge and they blend in quite well. Then I don't generally knot, I just do 3 little stitches like this, very close together, and then I thread for about 1/2 inch to 1 inch through the layers, and then I cut it off so that I don't have any long threads on the back as well. So that's what I would do, applique everything down. If I'm doing cotton layers like this, I would use a cotton thread, stitch that down by appliquing. And once everything is stitched down the way that I want it, then I will think about what I want to do to embellish it. I'm going to embellish on another little piece that I've appliqued here and sort of give you some ideas. I like to embellish most of my edges of applique as well as embellish on top of them. I've done a back stitch here in a silky thread, and so it has a sheen. So I thought I would share a couple of different stitches with you, and all these stitches are in my little book Creative Stitching. So the first one I'm going to do is a little fly stitch. And I'll often use a fly stitch, give what I call like a dandelion effect around something. So I thought it would be really quite fun around this little circle here. So I'm using a variegated number 8 eleganza, and so the number 8s have green cores on them, and so they're easy to tell apart from the other sizes, which have different colors. Again, I'm threading a 24 chenille needle, because that is my general embroidery needle that I use for most stitches, unless I'm doing wrapped cast on stitches. This thread color, which is ECM 78, is from our primitive line, which has softer colors. So to do a little fly stitch, I'm going to come up about a scant 1/4 inch into my background on the left hand side of the stitch, go straight across to the right, come out in the center, so I'm on the edge of my circle, put the thread underneath the needle, and that'll give me a little V, and then I'm going to do a straight little stitch and repeat that. Come up on the left, come over to the right, back in the center, the thread underneath the needle, and then straight down like this. You can see as I do this little fly how it's going to change the edging of this. So I guess the fun thing for me is the more I do, the more I want to do, because it changes the piece so much and gives it a personality. And then you can always come back and add little French knots or little bullion knots inside the V's to make little flower shape. So another little tip with a fly stitch, especially when you're working around a circle, it can be hard to keep the little tails straight. So once I've done the V, you see if I hold this perpendicular to the edge, it'll help me for placement of keeping those straight. So that is sort of fun. You can see how that, and this little stitch works really nice also around flowers because of, like I said, the sort of dandelion effect or like some starburst. That's really fun. So the next one I'm going to do is I'm going to do a little chain stitch around the edge of this leaf, and you'll see how that'll also change the look of it. So I'm going to pick up a green thread. This is EZM 103. This is also in a size 8. It's variegated, so it'll have a little bit of a texture around there. But I tend not to use very contrasting colors. I like the colors to blend, and I prefer to use contrast. Say I want to do French knots down the center, then maybe I could pick up a teal or a pink or something like that, but I tend to edge with similar colors so that it enhances the piece. So to do a little chain stitch, you're going to come up, put your needle back in and where you came out, and come forward a little bit with the thread underneath the needle. Then you'll go back into that chain, forward, and these will connect and give a nice little edging around the edge of the leaf like this. A nice little stitch. I do like to use a chain, especially in a size 8, because sometimes if you just did a back stitch in an 8, it gets a little lost. I tend to do the back stitches in the heavier threads, the 5s or the 3s, because the chain stitch has like a double thread, so it's a little bit more visible than if it was for a back stitch. So you can see how that will edge the edge of the leaf. So you don't have to know very difficult stitches. You can do a lot of fun things with some fairly simple stitches as well. It's all about the threads and the application of where you put the stitches. This is what I like to do at a point. When I have made the last chain, I like to take it to the back and then come back up inside the chain. It sort of anchors it there because sometimes they want to move around a little bit. But this way, I always get a fairly good point. Come up the side here. When I'm embellishing, I want to end the thread. I actually end the same way that I showed you for wool thread. I prefer not to knot, but just to do little back stitches on the back. So you can see how that sort of changes what an image looks like, which is sort of fun. So, you can do as much embellishment as you like. Another nice thing is to do little French knots in the rickrack. If you've used rickracks, you can personalize your piece as much as you like so that you have a unique piece to put on your Yazzii bag. Again, you can then come back and hand quilt it or machine quilt it or just back it with a backing and a binding, and then it would be ready to attach to your bag. You can see here I've done little circles and just done random little things that come to mind. But it's also a wonderful way. I find often that I have lots of these little samples from teaching, and I then use them and incorporate them into different little bags. This piece, which is pre-printed piece of canvas, is stitched with my number 3 and 5 of Eleganza. Being a thicker thread, you can see how textural it is, and it really looks very nice stitched on this. So sometimes when I just want to do more like a slow stitching borrow type design, I can just do the stitching without doing some applique. There's many other ways they can be done. Here I knit with the number 3 and 5 Eleganza as well. So these are my green colors in the line. And then you can see also how I've hand quilted with an 8 eleganza, so it makes for another textural idea. I also sometimes do samples with ribbons, and so another way to do a little block that's pretty simple. You can choose your favorite ribbons, and then you can do some stitching on those to add another little texture and make a different little square to add to your pieces. This little circle one was machine quilted, and this would be ready to sew on as well. So if you make lots of little pieces, some of the smaller type Yazi bags are fun, and you can see how you can add it. So I would put it on, pin it in place, and then I use a little running stitch with a pearl cotton generally in the inside of the binding like this to attach it. I generally use a 3 millimeters needle and can then get through to the layer below in order to get that on. And another option would be to whip stitch it along the edge of the binding. So I'm just making these as a little quilt with a backing, little batting inside, quilting them and then binding them generally with a 2.5 inch cut binding. This little double deluxe is one of my favorite bags, and I think why I like it so much is that it always reminds me of an old-fashioned little sewing basket. So we have done them in a couple of different sizes in Yazi bags, and there's a larger one than this. We have them made without the handles so we can personalize them ourselves. And you can see that what I've done here is I have made 2 little handles that are in a little zaggy cotton fabric, so you could do something really fun. You could also put ribbon on it. And then I have made this little Boro pieced indigo piece, which I love because we've done a lot of indigo dyeing here in our studio, and so I've incorporated all the little pieces and a little bit of velvet here, you can see, as well as wool and cotton. And then I've used all my indigo threads and just done like a little Boro stitching, so it makes for a nice little top. I then took some of our webbing and a little bit of our strapping here, and I made a nice little strap. So I put some Velcro on it like this, you can see. So this will thread through here to give me a little carrying handle. And I also hand stitched this little design onto this tape that I stitched on here. And then I did a Velcro closure. And so you can now have a nice little sewing bag or sewing box, which is, like I said, one of my favorite little designs from Yazi. Back here are also lots of different ideas. Here is one that I did for my kappa, and I used a ribbon to put on the handle, so that's a little different. This one I just made a little band with little circles. Same with the little ironing bag that's bound with little circles. These little ones are from our pre-cut blocks, so you can use those for embellishing as well. This little bee one that I designed, and this is the bag from Folk Tales. This little bag back here, which I love, it has storage for our pouches, so you can fill these with threads and then carry them like this. But I love the front of this because I did this with a little Boro piece incorporating buttons and Sashiko, and then I also embellished the handle. So there's so many varieties of bags for all different uses. So you would find the ones that work best for you, but have fun, embellishing them and creating a fun little cover that is uniquely yours.